These days, Chuck Norris is mostly known as a meme icon, and it might seem like he was always hugely popular, but that's not really the case. In reality, Norris was never all that famous in the West, and most of his films barely made any money at the box office. Interestingly, his strongest box office performances relative to budget came early in his career, in the late 1970s. These films got little exposure and remain largely unknown outside the US. The projects that actually made Norris famous came out in the mid-1980s. Their major success during the video rental era turned him into one of the most recognizable action heroes among international audiences, although he still trailed far behind actors like Steven Seagal or Jean-Claude Van Damme. In the US, however, Norris's accomplishments weren't really recognized until the 2000s, when politicians started showering him with honorary medals and the internet popularized Chuck Norris facts, which taught us that he could squeeze orange juice out of a lemon and had counted to infinity, twice. Chuck's first role in a major film was in Bruce Lee's The Way of the Dragon, which he landed through connections. In that sense, his career started out a lot like Steven Seagal's, except Seagal rose to fame quickly while Norris had to wait. As a middleweight karate world champion, Norris opened a chain of karate schools in the 1960s, which attracted many Hollywood stars thanks to the growing popularity of martial arts. One of them was American actor Steve McQueen, who introduced Norris to the people behind The Way of the Dragon. The global box office success of Bruce Lee's film brought fame not only to Bruce himself, who played the lead role, but also to Norris, who played the villain. Right after The Way of the Dragon, he signed on for another villain role in the Hong Kong film Slaughter in San Francisco. Despite its modest budget, the film flopped. Chuck caught a lot of criticism too. After such a disappointing failure, he took a few years off from acting to regroup. Norris came back with a low-budget film, Breaker Breaker, his first fully American production. His earlier films have all been made by Hong Kong filmmakers. The film was mediocre and didn't even make it into US theaters. After that, Norris's luck took a turn for the better. The action film Good Guys Wear Black, which cost only $1 million, was a huge hit, grossing $19 million in theaters. For American audiences, Good Guys Wear Black remains one of his most well-known films. The name of Chuck Norris's character in The Expendables 2 is a direct reference to it. Norris described the film as a turning point in his life. Agreeing to the role meant choosing acting over his athletic career. At the time, he was working with Benny Urquidez to create a new kickboxing league, and taking the role meant abandoning those plans. After such a major success, Chuck was flooded with offers. His next two films, A Force of One and The Octagon, each pulled in another $20 million at the box office. Everyone was predicting a bright future for Norris, and his earnings per role climbed close to $500,000. A popular rumor claims that A Force of One owes its success to Keanu Reeves. The director of A Force of One, Paul Aaron, used to be married to Reeves' mother, Patricia Taylor. Although Aaron and Taylor were already divorced by the time he worked on Norris's film, he remained on good terms with Reeves, who was living and going to school in Toronto. They would often go see action movies together. One of those was Bruce Lee's The Way of the Dragon, starring Norris. According to the rumor, it was Reeves who convinced Paul Aaron to take on the new film with Norris when he was offered the director's chair. Aaron was mostly a Broadway director and wasn't excited about doing a fight movie, but in the end, he gave in to Reeves' persuasion. However, after 3 box office hits in a row, Norris's career began to stall. After The Octagon came An Eye for an Eye, Norris's most expensive project at the time. The film was fairly popular outside the US during the video rental era, but the action flick unexpectedly flopped, grossing only $7 million on a $5 million budget. The most surprising part? An Eye for an Eye had the highest audience and critic ratings of any of Norris's films up to that point. Many blame the failure of An Eye for an Eye on the lack of a major studio backing it and an unfortunate release date. Around the same time, the horror film An American Werewolf in London hit theaters. It grossed $30 million and quickly became a cult classic. Norris's next action film, Forced Vengeance, also flopped. It had about the same budget as An Eye for an Eye, but made $1 million less at the box office. Apparently, realizing something had to change, after Forced Vengeance, Norris took on an unexpected role in the sci-fi horror film Silent Rage. Judging by the number of viewer ratings today, it's one of Norris's least known films, but at the time it earned him the best reviews of his career. The movie about Norris fighting a zombie wasn't exactly a hit, but it wasn't a bomb either. With the $4.5 million budget, it made $10 million at the US box office. 1983 marked the release of Lone Wolf McQuade, arguably Chuck Norris's most famous film. It didn't do very well at the box office, but it did manage to recoup its budget. The film grossed $12 million at the box office on a $5 million production budget. There's a rumor online that the producers saw Bruce Lee as the perfect fit for the role of the main villain, and had he still been alive in the early 1980s, they would have offered him the role. In that case, the film's tagline would have been changed to the rematch of the century. Sounds silly, and it's unlikely Bruce would have agreed to something like that, but then again, who knows what his career might have looked like by the mid-1980s. Chuck Norris is a big fan of the film, and always enjoys talking about his time working on it. In an interview, when asked about the fighting skills of David Carradine, who Norris had to fight in the film, Norris said that Carradine is as good at martial arts as he is at acting. You've got to admit, he's not lacking in self-irony. Rumor has it that all of Norris's jabs at Carradine stemmed from their final fight scene in the film. Allegedly, at some point, the actors broke out in a real fight. Carradine was the one who started it. He hit Norris hard several times and kept doing it even after Norris asked him to go easier. On top of that, Carradine's contract stated he couldn't be killed in a hand-to-hand fight. That's why he was blown up with a grenade at the end of the film. Lone Wolf McQuade features one of the two most iconic moments of Norris's career, the scene where he bursts out of the ground in his truck. Lone Wolf largely served as inspiration for the TV series Walker, Texas Ranger. The main reason for Lone Wolf's box office underperformance was its budget. It was the most expensive film of Norris's career, while its earnings turned out to be fairly modest. After a string of flops, major independent studios turned their backs on Chuck, and he was forced to sign a contract with the Canon Group, a company that, at the time, produced extremely low-budget films aimed at the home video market. They were behind the American Ninja series and also supported Van Damme by funding his early low-budget projects, which eventually helped him break into major Hollywood productions. At first, Norris and the Canon Group were doing very well. His film, Missing in Action, grossed $23 million at the US box office on a budget of just $2 million. It was the biggest success of Norris's career. None of his other films ever made that much money again. Missing in Action features the second iconic moment in the actor's career, when Chuck rises out of the water with his famous machine gun. The huge success of Missing in Action briefly revived Norris's career and earned him an offer from a major Hollywood studio. That studio was Orion Pictures, the distributor behind James Cameron's The Terminator and Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop. Norris's collaboration with Orion resulted in the action film Code of Silence. It is considered the best film of his career by critics and US audiences alike. Code of Silence became Norris's last major box office success, grossing $21 million on a $7 million budget. That might be because the script was originally written with Clint Eastwood in mind. Code of Silence was supposed to be the fourth film in the Dirty Harry series, but Eastwood turned it down. What's even more interesting is that Norris ended up in the film by chance. The reason was the halted production of the Canon Group's Invasion USA. According to his contract, Norris wasn't allowed to appear in films from other studios. However, Canon's owners Menahem Golan and Yoram Globus made an exception and let him work on Code of Silence. Norris considers it his favorite film. After their relatively big success of Missing in Action, the Canon Group released two sequels. While the second film managed to bring in some money, earning $11 million at the box office, the third film was a total flop. Many believe Chuck Norris was one of the reasons behind the Canon Group's bankruptcy. The small studio trusted him so much that it kept investing more and more money into his films while also trying to expand and increase its yearly output. But their profits didn't follow. Despite the international popularity of films like Firewalker, Invasion USA, and The Delta Force, they failed to recoup their budgets of $9 to $12 million, which were huge for both Norris and the studio. Firewalker and The Delta Force were Canon's biggest hits in 1986. Maybe if the budgets had been smaller, Norris's career and the studio's fate might have turned out differently. Sylvester Stallone also played a role in Canon's downfall by starring in their most expensive film, Over the Top. By the late 1980s, the studio was crumbling. Film budgets kept shrinking, creditors were growing increasingly demanding, and this led to a split between the owners, legal disputes, and the eventual collapse of the company. In the 1990s, the Canon Group ceased to exist, and its film library was acquired by MGM. Anyway, in the early 1990s, after a string of failures, Norris managed to break free from his Canon contract and starred in the box office hit Sidekicks. While he didn't play the lead role, the film was entirely his idea, and he personally secured funding for it from Texas investors. That same year, he got an offer from CBS. Norris accepted and set out to conquer the small screen with the series Walker, Texas Ranger. While the show wasn't exactly a smash hit on American TV, halfway through its run it averaged 12 to 14 million viewers. Today, that would be a phenomenal number for any network, but back then it was just slightly above average. For comparison, Magnum P.I. drew 22 million viewers, The X-Files pulled 20 million, and Friends easily topped 40 million. Meanwhile, the well-known series Martial Law, which featured a crossover episode with Walker, Texas Ranger, was cancelled after drawing only 11 million viewers. At the time, that was considered too low for CBS. Most likely, Norris would have been forgotten long ago, since he never really became a huge star. But in the late 2000s, the internet turned him into a meme icon, and his popularity skyrocketed. Thanks to that new fame, Norris landed a role in The Expendables 2. Sylvester Stallone just couldn't pass up the opportunity. Norris was even asked to include one of the meme facts in the film. He let his wife decide, and she picked the one about the snake that died in agony after biting Chuck. Nowadays, Norris is doing great. In his 80s, he writes books, attends events, and openly criticizes double standards in the US. But hey, he's an old grandpa now. What do you expect? Thanks for watching. Subscribe and stay tuned.